It was one of those quiet nights in Florence, the kind that makes you believe that everything, somehow, could start anew. I sat alone at a corner table in La Notte Cafe, tracing my fingers absent-mindedly over the worn wooden surface, the candle flickering gently beside a forgotten espresso. I almost didn't notice when he sat down across from me, a stranger with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. He placed an old book on the table, and my heart skipped when I recognized the cover. It was as though he'd found a missing part of my story without even knowing my name. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if he'd stay until morning, if we'd talk, long enough for everything unsaid to finally find words. Have you ever met someone just once, yet carried them forever in your heart? I'd love to hear your story, too. Emma lived quietly on the edge of a small town in Vermont, tucked away in a cottage shaded by maple trees whose leaves turned to fire each autumn. It was the kind of town where neighbors knew each other by name, exchanged gentle smiles in the mornings, and left baskets of homemade cookies on porches without a note. From the outside, her life appeared gentle and complete. Warm light glowing softly from the windows, the radio quietly murmuring nostalgic tunes from the 1990s, a steaming cup of tea always within reach. But beneath this peaceful surface, Emma's world held gaps she carefully hid, empty spaces left behind by missed chances and words she'd never found the courage to speak. At 48, Emma wore her solitude with grace, wrapped in layers of soft cashmere sweaters and scarves that held faint memories of places she'd visited. She wrote quietly for a living, stories about love, courage, and second chances, even as she hesitated to seek those things herself. Her marriage had ended 8 years earlier, a gentle unraveling of threads until the fabric simply fell apart, leaving behind a silence she'd slowly filled with comforting routines. Yet, beneath those routines lay a quiet ache, a silent question whispering in her ear. What if there was something more? Emma often caught herself glancing at the photographs scattered throughout her cozy home, each framed memory like a door she'd closed but never locked. Even now, as her life had settled into a gentle rhythm of work, walks by the lake, and evenings spent by the fireplace, she still yearned quietly for the kind of connection she'd almost stopped believing in. Perhaps that's why she found herself in Florence that summer, drawn inexplicably towards something she couldn't yet define, hoping quietly for an encounter that might finally fill the emptiness she kept hidden so well. Have you ever felt the quiet, longing for something you couldn't quite name, something just beyond your reach? Tell me your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Emma hadn't planned on going to Florence. She'd intended only a brief escape, a way to clear her mind, reset her life, and perhaps find the strength to start again. But something about the city called to her, tugging gently at the edges of her soul, whispering quietly of forgotten dreams. Arriving in late afternoon, she wandered the cobblestone streets, letting herself become lost amid the honey-colored buildings, breathing. In the fragrance of warm bread and jasmine blossoms, she felt strangely at ease here, far from home, away from reminders of the past, surrounded instead by history she could admire from a safe distance. As twilight fell, Emma found herself drawn down a quiet alleyway where the faint strains of violin music drifted softly toward her. Following the sound, she stepped into La Notte Cafe, a tiny, warmly lit refuge nestled between an old bookshop and a shuttered art gallery. The air inside was thick with the comforting scent of espresso and antique wood, each table illuminated by a small flickering candle. Choosing a corner table by the window, she ordered coffee and settled in, watching shadows dance gently across the walls, the music wrapping around her like an old familiar shawl. Emma barely noticed when the door opened, bringing in a brief gust of cool night air, but she glanced up just long enough to see him enter. A tall man, older, with silver-streaked hair and gentle eyes. Something about his presence shifted the atmosphere subtly, as though the entire room had quietly noticed him as well. He looked around briefly, then made his way toward Emma, gesturing politely at the empty chair opposite her. Without knowing exactly why, she nodded, inviting him silently to join her. As he sat down, he carefully placed a well-worn book on the table, its faded blue cover instantly recognizable. Emma felt her breath catch softly in her throat. It was the same edition she'd cherished years ago, a book she'd lost somewhere along life's journey. The man followed her gaze to the book and smiled, a smile gentle and knowing, yet carrying a hint of quiet sadness. He introduced himself only as someone who, like her, found comfort in unfamiliar places, and they began talking easily, naturally, as if they'd known each other for far longer than mere minutes. Throughout that long, quiet night, they spoke of art, books, life, and dreams, sharing secrets neither had ever voiced to another soul. Hours drifted softly past them, the cafe slowly emptying around their quiet corner. Yet not once did they exchange names or personal details. There seemed a silent agreement to keep this moment suspended, untouched by reality's constraints. Emma felt an inexplicable sense of calm with him, an ease she hadn't known in years, as though finally, in this perfect anonymity, she could simply be herself without caution or fear. When dawn's first gentle glow began to seep through the window, Emma looked up, startled by the realization of time passing. She hadn't meant to stay so long, hadn't intended to share so much, yet now, sitting across from this quiet stranger, she felt a shift within herself. Something small but meaningful, a delicate crack in the carefully built walls around her heart. As the morning light deepened, he stood slowly, offering her another soft, lingering smile, and then quietly walked away, leaving behind only the book and a lingering warmth in Emma's chest. Have you ever had a night you wished would never end, knowing it would change everything? Share your story with me. The next morning, Florence felt different, as if the city itself had shifted subtly overnight. Emma woke in her rented room above a flower shop, memories of the night before drifting slowly back, still dreamlike yet vividly real. She rose and dressed quickly, compelled by an urgent need to return to La Notte Café, hoping silently to find him still there. The streets were quiet, their ancient stones cool beneath her sandals as she made her way through familiar alleyways. Her heart fluttered gently, caught between hope and uncertainty, the echoes of their conversation still whispering in her mind. Arriving at the cafe, Emma pushed gently against the wooden door, the familiar bell chiming softly. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the empty tables where just hours ago they'd shared their quiet truths. She scanned the room carefully, but the stranger was nowhere to be found. Disappointment, quiet yet piercing, settled in her chest. She stepped toward the table where they'd sat, noticing for the first time that he'd left the book behind, its faded blue cover waiting patiently for her touch. Picking it up slowly, Emma felt its weight, its worn edges familiar, beneath her fingers. As she turned its pages carefully, a photograph slipped silently to the floor. She knelt to retrieve it, discovering a small black-and-white image, a woman, younger than Emma, smiling at someone just beyond the camera's reach. The woman's expression stirred something within her, familiar yet indistinct, a feeling Emma couldn't quite place. Flipping the photograph over, she found a handwritten note scrawled in faded ink. "Remember me like a beautiful dream." The words caught her breath, their gentle mystery wrapping around her thoughts. Who was this woman, and what had she meant to him? Emma's curiosity stirred deeply, but alongside it arose an unfamiliar pang of envy. This stranger who'd sat opposite, her who had listened so intently and shared so openly, clearly carried someone else silently within him. A quiet ache bloomed gently inside her, tempered by the realization of how quickly she'd allowed herself to feel something deeper, more complicated than she'd intended. Emma tucked the photograph gently back between the pages, her fingers lingering softly on the handwritten note. She looked around the cafe, now bustling quietly with locals and tourists alike, none aware of the subtle shift occurring within her. Maria, the cafe owner, approached softly, sensing Emma's quiet turmoil. With a knowing glance, she gently asked if Emma had found what she'd been looking for, her voice careful, as if she understood more than she revealed. "He left so suddenly," Emma murmured, surprised by how openly she voiced the quiet hurt. Maria smiled gently, placing a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder before quietly saying something Emma hadn't expected. Perhaps he feared that staying longer would turn the dream into something ordinary. Emma felt those words reverberate gently within her, turning them over slowly in her mind as she sipped her coffee, her eyes drifting back to the worn book in her hands. Maybe it was true. Maybe certain connections were meant only for a moment, held gently in memory rather than chased into reality. Yet something restless stirred within her, a question she couldn't fully silence. What if she'd said more, asked more clearly, tried harder to hold on to the night? As afternoon settled quietly over Florence, Emma made her way back to her small room, carrying the book as though it held all the answers she needed. Sitting by the open window, warm air drifting softly through the curtains, she opened it again, hoping perhaps to discover something more within its pages. She paused at a passage underlined lightly in pencil. "We live not in the present, but in anticipation of memory." Her heart paused, recognizing the truth she herself had lived so long. Had the stranger marked these words for her? Or was this merely coincidence, another gentle twist in a story filled with unanswered questions? Emma closed her eyes, allowing the warm breeze to brush gently across her face, sensing a quiet yet profound shift within herself. Maybe this encounter wasn't simply a fleeting memory to treasure. Perhaps it was a quiet signal, an invitation to reconsider how she'd always viewed love, longing, and loss. She suddenly knew, with soft clarity, that her quiet, careful life would never feel quite the same again. Have you ever found something small, perhaps a photograph, a note, that changed your entire story? Share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. As evening fell softly once more, Emma wandered back onto the streets of Florence, the book clutched protectively to her chest, her thoughts swirling gently around the photograph and the handwritten, "Joe." The city's warm lights flickered to life, illuminating windows, casting soft golden glows onto cobblestones. But for Emma, the colors seemed muted, touched by a sense of bittersweet uncertainty. She found herself drifting slowly past couples walking arm in arm, laughter echoing softly, feeling for the first time a delicate sting of envy that hadn't been present before, a quiet awareness of what she'd been missing all these years. Drawn inexplicably toward the river, Emma paused by the ancient Ponte Vecchio, resting her elbows gently against the stone wall as she gazed out over the water, reflecting city lights shimmering softly back at her. A street musician nearby began playing, a melancholy tune, the gentle notes resonating softly within her, echoing the quiet ache she'd been trying to suppress. She closed her eyes briefly, picturing the stranger's face once more, his gentle, knowing eyes, his subtle smile, the quiet certainty he'd exuded during their brief encounter, and wondered quietly if he, too, was standing somewhere, feeling as inexplicably lost yet found as she did now. Emma opened the book once again, allowing the wind to softly ruffle its pages, as though fate itself might choose where she landed. A tiny scrap of paper fluttered gently from between the pages, drifting quietly to the ground. She knelt down slowly to retrieve it, heart quickening slightly as she read the delicate handwriting. A small, hastily written message she hadn't noticed before, hidden until now. "If you return here someday, I'll know we weren't only a dream." Caught her breath softly, understanding suddenly clear. Perhaps this story wasn't quite over yet. After returning home to Vermont, Emma found herself often drifting into quiet moments of reflection, her thoughts inevitably returning to Florence. The worn book, now tucked neatly beside her bed, served as a gentle reminder of the stranger she'd met, the man who'd managed to unlock something long buried within her. She tried, at first, to convince herself that the entire night had been little more than a pleasant dream, something to hold gently in her memory, but not to dwell upon. Yet, each evening as she sat by the window, watching the sunset cast soft, shades of gold across the rolling hills beyond, Emma couldn't shake the sense of something unfinished, something left gently, tantalizingly open. Days turned softly into weeks, and Emma found herself increasingly restless, her careful routines disrupted by small reminders. The faded postcard of Florence she'd tucked into the corner of her mirror, the soft sound of a violin drifting from a neighbor's window, even the scent of fresh espresso that lingered whenever she passed her local cafe. Each memory pulled at the edges of her heart, quietly nudging her toward a decision she wasn't yet ready to make. The question lingered constantly in the gentle silence of her home. Could she truly return to Florence, risking disappointment and potential heartbreak? Or should she quietly allow the memory to remain untouched, preserved perfectly in its fleeting form? One morning, Emma received a phone call from Julia, her oldest friend, who had always believed strongly in fate and second chances. Julia sensed immediately that something had changed within Emma, hearing the quiet hesitation in her friend's voice as she described the encounter in Florence. Emma could almost see Julia's knowing smile through the phone as she gently insisted that perhaps this was the universe's way of nudging Emma toward something more meaningful. Julia's voice was filled with warmth as she softly encouraged Emma to consider going back, arguing gently but persuasively that some risks were worth taking, especially those involving matters of the heart. Days later, after countless nights of restless contemplation, Emma booked another flight to Italy, her fingers trembling slightly as she clicked the confirmation button. She told herself it was simply curiosity, nothing more than a quiet desire for closure. Yet deep inside, she understood it was something far stronger, a chance to finally reclaim a part of herself she'd quietly locked away long ago. Before leaving, she spent an afternoon carefully packing her suitcase, choosing clothing and items with a quiet, meaningful precision, as if each choice symbolized a small, deliberate step toward the new chapter she desperately needed. The flight back to Florence was filled with anticipation and quiet uncertainty, her mind replaying fragments of their conversation, analyzing each word and pause for hidden meaning. She felt an unexpected flutter in her stomach as the plane landed, wondering softly if he might, somehow, sense her arrival. As she stepped onto the familiar cobblestones once more, Florence welcomed her gently, the air fragrant with jasmine, and memories embracing her like an old friend. Emma checked back into her familiar room above the flower shop, smiling softly at the familiar scent of lilies drifting through the open window. But this time, the city felt charged with quiet anticipation, every street corner and shadowed alleyway carrying the potential of reunion. She returned immediately to La Nota Cafe, her heartbeat quickening gently as she pushed open the familiar door. Luca greeted her warmly, his eyes sparkling with quiet recognition, clearly remembering her from before. As they spoke, Luca mentioned casually, almost offhandedly, that her mysterious companion had indeed returned to the cafe a few weeks after her departure, asking carefully if a woman from Vermont had returned. Luca's revelation stirred Emma deeply, filling her with quiet regret but also hope. He'd come back, and somehow that small piece of knowledge felt profoundly important, as if it validated every restless night she'd spent since. Emma spent days quietly searching the familiar streets, hoping silently to find him. Yet each evening ended gently in solitude. Her conversations with Luca became longer, more personal, the young man sharing softly of his own experiences with love and loss, each story a gentle echo of her own quiet longing. Slowly, the cafe became her second home, a place where her hopes and quiet frustrations gently intertwined. In quiet moments alone, Emma wandered through Florence's narrow streets, exploring bookstores and galleries, allowing the city to gently guide her toward a deeper understanding of herself. One rainy afternoon, as she took refuge inside a small, dimly lit bookstore, she stumbled upon a rare collection of old photographs, each image capturing fleeting moments of quiet intimacy. Among them, she found another copy of the same book she'd shared with the stranger, its pages worn similarly to her own, filled gently with penciled notes in a handwriting strikingly similar to his. Emma's pulse quickened as she carefully examined the book, discovering a short, delicate inscription. On its final page, "To L, who taught me to cherish brief moments as though they last forever." Holding the book gently, she realized with quiet clarity that their encounter, no matter how brief, had changed her irrevocably, shifting her perception of love and connection in ways she'd never anticipated. She carried the book back to her room, her heart heavy, yet strangely buoyant, wondering softly how one brief meeting could resonate so deeply, so persistently within her. Sitting quietly by the window as rain fell softly against the panes, Emma knew she had arrived at a gentle crossroads. Should she continue searching, risking potential heartache, or accept quietly that perhaps this fragile connection was never meant to be anything more than a beautifully unfinished story? As the days passed quietly, Emma found herself drawn more deeply into the gentle rhythm of Florence, each moment reinforcing her quiet connection to this city and its subtle power to both comfort and challenge her. Each morning, she returned to La Note Café, sipping espresso at the same corner table, watching quietly as strangers entered and departed, their lives briefly intersecting with hers. Yet each day, the absence of the man who had touched her life so fleetingly remained palpable, lingering gently like a soft shadow cast by the sunlight through the cafe's windows. One evening, as the setting sun cast delicate hues of amber across the Ponte Vecchio, Emma received a call from Julia. Her friend's familiar voice, filled with gentle concern, brought a quiet warmth and comfort. Julia asked softly if she'd found the answers she'd been seeking, her tone careful, sensing Emma's inner turmoil even from thousands of miles away. Emma hesitated, unsure how to articulate the quiet ache that had become a constant companion since returning. After a moment, she admitted quietly to Julia that perhaps the answers she sought might never fully reveal themselves, that some encounters might forever remain gently unresolved. Julia listened carefully before responding gently, yet firmly. "Maybe that's exactly why you needed to return, to accept quietly that some things are meant to remain beautiful precisely because they're incomplete." Her friend's words resonated softly within her, urging Emma toward acceptance of the gentle uncertainty that now defined her days. After the call ended, Emma stood quietly by the river, watching lights flicker softly upon the water's surface, wondering silently if acceptance meant resignation or simply finding peace within the unknown. Later that night, unable to sleep, Emma carefully opened the worn book again, her fingers softly tracing the handwritten notes in its margins, each faint line seeming to whisper secrets from a life she would never fully know. Lost in thought, she found herself wandering back to memories of her marriage, the quiet, steady unraveling of love, the moments when silence had slowly filled the spaces between them until words felt impossible. It struck her gently that perhaps her fear of risking connection again was rooted not in the pain of loss itself, but in the quiet, relentless regret of having never fully opened herself to possibility. The following morning, resolved yet vulnerable, Emma returned to La Notte Café, her heart quickening gently when Luca approached her table with a shy, hesitant smile. Carefully, almost apologetically, Luca handed her a small envelope, explaining quietly that it had been left at the cafe weeks earlier by her mysterious stranger. Emma's pulse quickened, her fingers trembling slightly as she accepted the envelope, noticing the careful handwriting across its surface, addressed simply, "To the woman who remembers." Opening it carefully, she unfolded a brief note, its message concise yet filled with quiet significance. I hope you find this only if you return. If you do, know that meeting you made me believe again, even if just for one night, that some dreams might still find their way into reality." Emma felt her breath catch gently, heart swelling quietly with gratitude, sadness, and hope intertwined. In that moment, she realized clearly that no matter what happened next, her journey had already transformed her profoundly, teaching her softly that true connection, however brief, was worth every risk, every quiet ache of longing. Holding the note gently to her chest, Emma understood that perhaps her story was only just beginning. After reading the note, Emma folded it gently and slipped it carefully back into her bag, her heart quietly resonating with a depth of emotion she hadn't anticipated. She left the cafe with an unfamiliar sense of clarity, mingled gently with uncertainty. Florence had offered her far more than she'd expected, a glimpse into what could be if she were brave enough to seize it. Now she knew the choice was hers. Continue seeking a ghost, or find a way to let this quietly beautiful encounter guide her toward genuine healing and growth. Over the following days, Emma spent her time exploring Florence differently, wandering softly through its museums and gardens, allowing the city's quiet beauty to soothe and comfort her. Each morning began with a slow stroll along the river, the waters gently reflecting the pastel colors of dawn, mirroring her own quiet introspection. As she walked, Emma found herself replaying moments from her past, the quiet unraveling of her marriage, the gentle sadness she'd carried with her for years, and now, this brief yet transformative encounter that had shifted everything within. Her one afternoon, as she lingered in a quiet gallery admiring Renaissance paintings, Emma noticed an older woman gazing intently at a particular portrait, her eyes softly glistening with unspoken emotion. Drawn quietly to the woman's quiet dignity, Emma moved closer, gently initiating conversation. They spoke softly at first, exchanging polite observations about art and history, until gradually their conversation deepened into something more meaningful. The woman introduced herself as Isabella, a lifelong Florentine who had once known great love but had lost it suddenly, decades ago. Emma listened carefully as Isabella described her quiet journey through grief, loneliness, and ultimately acceptance. Isabella's eyes held gentle wisdom as she explained how love, even fleeting, incomplete love, had a way of reshaping one's heart forever. Emma felt tears quietly fill her eyes as Isabella concluded softly, "Sometimes we carry people inside us not to mourn them endlessly, but to celebrate the brief, beautiful ways they've touched our lives." Moved profoundly by Isabella's gentle wisdom, Emma began to understand more clearly what her encounter truly meant. Perhaps the stranger had entered her life precisely to remind her that living fully meant embracing uncertainty, accepting quietly, that love's true beauty often lay in its very impermanence. Isabella's words resonated deeply within her, reinforcing Julia's earlier encouragement to step beyond comfort and risk vulnerability. That evening, Emma found herself writing quietly in her notebook, detailing every nuance of her encounter: the book, the photograph, the note, the quiet, unspoken connection that lingered so vividly in her memory. Writing became a gentle act of release, each word softly loosening the hold that fear and regret had held on her heart for so long. As the words flowed gently across the page, Emma realized how profoundly she'd changed since stepping foot in Florence, not just because of a stranger, but because she'd finally allowed herself the courage to truly feel again. In the days that followed, Emma returned frequently to La Note Café, sharing gentle conversations with Luca, who listened patiently, offering quiet, thoughtful insights beyond his years. Their connection grew naturally, effortlessly, Luca becoming a gentle anchor within the gentle turbulence of Emma's emotions. One afternoon, after Luca placed her usual espresso gently on the table, he hesitated briefly, his eyes filled with gentle curiosity. then asked softly if she'd ever considered staying permanently in Florence. Emma's heart quickened softly at the suggestion, her immediate instinct to dismiss it giving way gradually to quiet contemplation. The thought hadn't consciously crossed her mind before, yet now, presented gently by someone who had come to know her well, the idea held surprising appeal. Could she truly uproot her carefully structured life in Vermont for something so uncertain, guided solely by intuition and gentle possibility? As she wrestled quietly with the decision, Emma revisited familiar places, slowly beginning to imagine a life permanently intertwined with the city. Each evening, she lingered quietly by the Ponte Vecchio, the river softly whispering its gentle encouragement, the street lamps casting pools of gentle golden light around her feet. Florence felt more and more like home, its gentle embrace inviting her to release old wounds and step into a life filled with quiet, authentic possibility. Yet deep within, Emma understood that her hesitation wasn't simply about place, but about the courage required to truly leave behind the quiet safety she'd carefully constructed. Late one night, sitting quietly by her open window, Emma opened her phone and found herself scrolling through old messages from Julia, each filled with gentle encouragement and unwavering faith. Tears blurred her vision softly as she typed a quiet confession, admitting softly her fear of repeating past mistakes, of placing hope in something uncertain only to experience disappointment again. Julia's reply came swiftly, her words filled with quiet conviction. Emma, life isn't about avoiding hurt, it's about having the courage to embrace it fully. You've spent years guarding your heart. Maybe it's time to trust yourself enough to risk vulnerability again. Emma read the message, slowly, her heart swelling quietly with gratitude and resolve. Julia was right. Perhaps true strength wasn't measured by careful avoidance of pain, but by one's gentle willingness to open oneself fully, despite the uncertainty of outcome. The next morning, Emma approached Luca at La Notte Cafe, gently expressing her decision to remain in Florence indefinitely. Luca smiled warmly, his quiet encouragement reaffirming her choice. Yet, even as excitement stirred gently within her, Emma felt a quiet shadow of unresolved longing, one last thread connecting her to the mysterious stranger who had unknowingly guided her toward this transformative moment. Later, as twilight gently enveloped the city, Emma stood again by the Ponte Vecchio, her thoughts drifting quietly to the night they'd shared, the conversations, the quiet laughter, the gentle silences filled with unspoken connection. She wondered softly if he, too, ever stood somewhere thinking of her, questioning quietly what might have been. Closing her eyes briefly, Emma silently thanked him, knowing clearly that regardless of whether their paths ever crossed again, their brief encounter had forever reshaped the quiet landscape of her heart. She now stood gently poised between acceptance and yearning, understanding fully the complex, beautiful pain of embracing uncertainty. As the evening breeze whispered softly around her, Emma turned slowly from the river, stepping gently yet deliberately toward the new life she'd quietly chosen. Behind her, the city lights began twinkling softly, illuminating a future filled not with guarantees, but with the gentle, breathtaking possibility of love, healing, and quiet courage. Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, choosing between safety and uncertainty, past and possibility? I'd love to hear your story. Months passed quietly as Emma began to weave herself into the gentle tapestry of Florence, each day reinforcing her decision to remain. Her routine became comfortable. Mornings at La Notte Cafe, afternoons spent writing quietly in small parks, evenings wandering the softly lit streets of the city that had claimed her heart. Yet, despite this newfound contentment, a quiet ache lingered subtly beneath her daily rhythm, a gentle reminder of the stranger whose brief appearance had irrevocably altered her life's trajectory. As Emma slowly made peace with the likelihood that she'd never see him again, fate, it seemed, held other plans. One quiet afternoon, as autumn painted the city in hues of gold and amber, Emma stopped by La Note Café, now as familiar to her as her own reflection. Luca greeted her with his usual warmth, yet something different flickered briefly behind his gentle eyes. Hesitation mixed softly with an unspoken tension. He asked quietly if she could stay longer today, his voice careful, yet revealing nothing further. Emma agreed, curiosity quietly blossoming within her, sensing intuitively that something significant hovered gently in the air. As the afternoon progressed, she busied herself quietly, revising pages of her manuscript, the familiar murmurs of the cafe providing gentle background comfort. Eventually, Luca approached again, his expression quietly serious. "Someone came asking for you," he began softly, eyes filled with cautious hope. "He left this. He asked specifically that you read it only when you're ready." Emma's heart quickened gently as Luca handed her a sealed envelope. Recognizing instantly the familiar handwriting, her fingers trembled softly as she accepted it, quietly thanking Luca, who offered a comforting nod before stepping away discreetly. Alone at her corner table, Emma stared at the envelope, heart pounding gently with anticipation and quiet fear. Taking a deep breath, she carefully broke the seal, unfolding a single sheet of paper inside, recognizing immediately the careful, familiar script. The letter began simply, his words measured and gentle. "Emma, I hesitated many times before writing this, uncertain if my words might disrupt the quiet peace you've hopefully found. But I needed you to understand the truth about that night, and why I left so abruptly. Our meeting wasn't entirely by chance. Perhaps fate played a hand, but I had known who you were even before sitting down. The book wasn't accidental. It belonged to someone deeply significant in my past. Her name was Laura, my wife, and she died 10 years ago. Losing her nearly destroyed me, and since then, I'd closed myself off, unwilling to risk connection again." Emma paused softly, absorbing each quiet revelation. Her pulse quickened gently, realizing that the photograph she'd discovered, the inscription, even their shared evening had been quietly shaped by his silent mourning. The letter continued gently, the stranger's vulnerability quietly laid bare. "When I first noticed you in Florence, you reminded me immediately of Laura. Not physically, perhaps, but something deeper, gentler, an echo of a presence I'd long missed. I approached you selfishly, driven initially by quiet curiosity and longing. But as we spoke, something changed within me. For the first time in years, I felt a quiet sense of hope, a chance to move beyond my grief, even though the guilt of feeling something for someone new overwhelmed me deeply. I left abruptly because I was terrified. Terrified not just of betraying Laura's memory, but of opening my heart again, even slightly, and risking the quiet devastation I'd already survived once. Yet in leaving, I realized how deeply you'd impacted me, how profoundly our brief encounter had shifted something fundamental within my heart." Emma's eyes filled gently with tears as she read, emotions tumbling softly, quietly within her chest. Each word resonated deeply, filling gaps she'd quietly carried since that night. Her heart ached gently, understanding now the weight of what he'd silently borne, the quiet complexity behind his sudden disappearance. She turned the letter carefully, reading the final lines slowly. "I returned to Florence again, knowing it was unlikely you'd still be here, but I needed closure, to know that I'd at least tried. Now, if by some small miracle you're reading this, I have one request. If you feel the same quiet yearning I've felt since leaving, meet me at La Note Café tonight, at sunset. If you don't come, I'll understand fully. But please know this, meeting. You allowed me to finally breathe again after years spent quietly drowning. Whatever your choice, I thank you profoundly for awakening my heart, even briefly." Emma sat quietly, her heart heavy with emotion. the cafe's gentle hum fading softly into background noise. Luca watched discreetly from a distance, sensing, quietly, the profound impact of the letter. Emma's thoughts swirled gently, each revelation deepening her quiet uncertainty and stirring complex feelings she'd quietly held at bay. She folded the letter gently, heart quietly aching with profound empathy, tenderness, and the undeniable stirrings of something deeper, something quietly approaching love. Outside, the sky softened gently, hues of lavender and gold beginning to paint the approaching evening. Emma glanced toward the window, quietly contemplating the stranger's request, knowing intuitively that the decision she faced carried quiet, yet life-altering significance. Could she risk everything she'd built in Florence, her careful, peaceful existence, for a man still haunted deeply by past love? Yet equally, could she quietly deny the profound, unmistakable connection they'd shared, one that had quietly reshaped both their hearts? She gathered her belongings slowly, heart pounding gently yet steadily, understanding now clearly that whatever choice she made next would irrevocably shape her life moving forward. As she stepped quietly from the cafe into the gentle warmth of early evening, Emma knew she stood gently at the threshold of a decision that demanded not only quiet courage, but profound trust in herself, in him, and in the quiet, fragile beauty of possibility. The hours leading up to sunset passed with quiet intensity, each moment amplifying Emma's inner turmoil, her thoughts drifting gently between fear and desire. She wandered slowly through familiar streets, hoping quietly that movement might soothe the storm within her. Yet everywhere she turned, gentle reminders of the stranger's words surfaced quietly, his vulnerability, his quiet courage in confessing truths she'd never imagined. She found herself back at the Ponte Vecchio, its familiar stone arches bathed gently in the fading evening light, golden reflections softly dancing on the water below. Emma leaned gently against the stone railing, breathing deeply to steady her nerves, her eyes following couples walking quietly along the bridge, their gentle affection magnifying her own longing and uncertainty. In these quiet moments, Emma's thoughts turned once again to Isabella, whose gentle wisdom had illuminated truths she'd been quietly avoiding. Isabella had known love deeply, had embraced vulnerability despite its inevitable risks. Emma wondered softly if she possessed the quiet bravery necessary to step toward uncertainty, embracing not just the beauty of possibility, but also its inherent, gentle danger. Her phone buzzed quietly, breaking her reverie, Julia's name appearing gently on the screen. Emma answered softly, her friend's voice instantly grounding her, filled with familiar warmth and quiet encouragement. Julia listened carefully as Emma shared the stranger's letter, her quiet voice trembling with emotion. After a brief pause, Julia spoke gently, her words firm yet tender, resonating deeply within Emma's heart. Emma, you've always protected yourself from heartbreak, but perhaps it's time to embrace the beauty of uncertainty. Whatever you decide, remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the quiet decision to move forward despite it. Julia's words settled gently within her, reinforcing the quiet conviction slowly blooming in her chest. Emma ended the call softly, gratitude filling her heart, clarity finally emerging quietly from the chaos. As the sky deepened gently into rich shades of violet and amber, Emma turned deliberately toward La Notte Café, her heartbeat quickening softly with each step, anticipation mingling quietly with quiet determination. Arriving just before sunset, Emma paused briefly outside the cafe, taking a deep, steadying breath. Through the window, she glimpsed a familiar figure seated quietly at their original table, his posture gentle yet uncertain, mirroring her own quiet vulnerability. Her heart quickened gently, recognizing instantly the quiet hopefulness of the moment, the profound significance quietly held within this simple reunion. Stepping inside carefully, Emma felt the warmth of the cafe envelop her gently, comforting yet charged with quiet anticipation. Their eyes met instantly, the silent, mutual recognition powerful, charged softly with emotions neither had fully allowed themselves to acknowledge until now. He stood slowly, his quiet presence drawing her gently forward, bridging quietly the emotional distance they'd both silently feared might remain. They sat opposite each other again, words briefly unnecessary, their quiet connection more powerful now for the truths shared in his letter. Finally, he spoke gently, his voice measured, yet revealing quiet vulnerability. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he confessed softly, his eyes holding hers steadily, honesty quietly reflected within them. Emma smiled gently, replying softly but confidently, "I wasn't sure either, until now." Their conversation unfolded quietly, yet profoundly, each sharing more openly than before. Their past grief, quiet fears, hesitant hopes. He spoke quietly of Laura, honoring gently her memory while acknowledging softly the shift within himself. Emma listened respectfully, quietly grateful for his openness, recognizing how his honesty mirrored gently her own quiet healing journey. As their conversation deepened, Emma felt quietly empowered by their mutual willingness to embrace vulnerability, acknowledging gently how profoundly their brief, unexpected meeting had reshaped both their lives. Yet beneath the quiet hopefulness lay unspoken uncertainty. Could two people, both still healing gently from past loss, truly find meaningful connection without fear overshadowing their gentle progress? Finally, as the cafe emptied softly around them, he reached carefully across the table, gently covering her hand with his own. His touch was cautious, respectful, yet charged quietly with the depth of feeling they'd both carried silently since their first meeting. Emma's heart quickened gently, understanding clearly the quiet significance of this simple gesture, recognizing gently that she now faced the most profound choice yet: acceptance or retreat, embracing quiet possibility or returning quietly to safer, solitary paths. He spoke softly again, voice trembling slightly with quiet sincerity. "Emma, I can't promise certainty or guarantee happiness, but I can promise honesty, openness, and the quiet courage to try. I don't expect immediate answers, only that you know clearly how deeply you've changed me. The decision now, gently yet entirely, is yours." Emma felt tears gather softly in her eyes, moved deeply by his quiet vulnerability, the profound honesty in his gentle confession. She squeezed his hand softly, silently signaling understanding, gratitude, and gentle acknowledgement of the quiet bravery required by this moment. Finally, she spoke quietly, yet clearly, her voice gentle but unwavering. "I came to Florence seeking answers, yet instead found deeper questions, but perhaps that's exactly what I needed. I don't know fully what the future holds for us, or even for myself, but I do know that living fully means embracing uncertainty, quietly choosing courage despite fear." He smiled gently, relief quietly washing over his features, understanding clearly the depth and quiet complexity of her words. In that moment, both understood gently yet profoundly that their story, though still uncertain, had quietly found solid ground, shaped gently by mutual trust, quiet bravery, and the fragile, beautiful power of hope. They sat quietly together as night fell gently around them, each understanding silently that this quiet moment represented not an ending, but the gentle, powerful beginning of a shared journey, one defined quietly by courage, vulnerability, and the profound willingness to love again, despite uncertainty's quiet shadow. As Emma gently rested her head against his shoulder, eyes softly closed, her heart filled quietly with gratitude for the unexpected beauty of this imperfect, deeply meaningful moment. She now knew clearly, gently, profoundly, love wasn't about guarantees, but about quiet bravery, delicate hope, and the gentle courage to embrace uncertainty wholeheartedly. Have you ever had a moment where your heart quietly chose courage despite uncertainty? I'd love to hear your story. In the quiet weeks following their reunion, Emma and the man, whose name she finally learned was David, began cautiously exploring their newfound connection. They met daily at La Note Café, walked quietly together along Florence's cobbled streets, and shared gentle moments beneath the comforting silence of ancient archways. Their conversations were careful yet honest, both navigating softly the fragile terrain of healing and hope, each aware of the shadows cast gently by their past. Despite the tenderness blossoming quietly between them, Emma felt an invisible barrier, a subtle distance, softly maintained, as though each feared that stepping too close might shatter the delicate peace they'd found. David, still haunted by his grief for Laura, sometimes withdrew gently into thoughtful silence, his gaze drifting toward unseen horizons. Emma recognized this quiet retreat, understanding intuitively the gentle weight he still carried, yet she too grappled privately with echoes from her past. Years spent in quiet regret and careful solitude, guarding her heart from disappointment and loss. One rainy evening, sitting quietly together by Emma's window overlooking a narrow street glistening softly with reflections of lamplight, David spoke gently yet hesitantly, confessing the depth of his fear that despite his genuine affection for her, he might never fully release the quiet hold Laura's memory held over him. Emma listened quietly, her heart aching gently, touched deeply by his vulnerability, yet quietly devastated by the realization that perhaps their connection, no matter how sincere, might always remain incomplete. As David left later that night, Emma felt the quiet emptiness of her apartment intensify softly around her. The clock ticked steadily in the background, a subtle reminder of time quietly slipping away, moments gently passing, irretrievable once gone. She paced slowly through rooms filled gently with mementos of her life in Vermont, each photograph and keepsake quietly echoing moments she'd allowed to pass unnoticed, opportunities quietly lost to silence and hesitation. Days passed quietly, into weeks, yet the gentle gap between Emma and David persisted softly, an unspoken hesitance neither quite knew how to overcome. Emma felt herself quietly retreating into old habits, long solitary walks, quiet afternoons spent gazing blankly out her window, evenings silently contemplating a future uncertain, gently slipping through her fingers. She saw clearly now the quiet price she'd paid for years of cautious living, the subtle, profound loss woven deeply into her life's fabric, a life carefully guarded, yet gently hollowed by missed chances and words never spoken. One quiet afternoon, Emma found herself back at La Note Café, alone this time, her usual corner table bathed softly in muted afternoon sunlight. Luca approached quietly, placing her espresso gently before her, hesitating briefly as though sensing the quiet ache within her. Finally, he spoke carefully, voice gentle yet direct. "Emma, sometimes love demands more than just gentle intentions. It requires bravery. Silence can protect us, but it also quietly steals our chances. Don't wait too long to say what truly matters." His words settled gently yet powerfully within her, echoing quietly through her thoughts as she sat alone, the cafe's gentle murmurs fading softly around her. Luca was right. She'd quietly allowed silence and hesitation to shape too many chapters of her life. Even now, standing quietly at the threshold of potential happiness, fear of loss and rejection held her softly immobile, unable to step forward decisively. Later that evening, Emma received a call from Julia, whose familiar voice carried gentle warmth yet quiet urgency. Julia had sensed Emma's hesitation even from afar, gently yet firmly reminding her that love required not only courage but the gentle willingness to risk pain, to move beyond quiet comfort zones into vulnerability. Emma listened quietly, tears, gently filling her eyes, recognizing the quiet truth in Julia's words, yet still feeling quietly trapped within her own careful hesitation. Days stretched gently onward, the quiet distance between Emma and David widening subtly yet perceptibly. Their meetings became less frequent, conversations quieter, each retreating softly into separate worlds. Emma felt herself quietly slipping back into familiar solitude, the gentle emptiness of her apartment increasingly filled by memories of missed opportunities, quiet regrets whispering softly in the corners of her mind. One evening, alone beneath a softly glowing street lamp near the Ponte Vecchio, Emma felt quiet clarity slowly emerge from the gentle fog surrounding her heart. She understood now the quiet tragedy of her life had never been singular moments of loss, but rather the steady accumulation of silence, words never spoken, chances quietly left untouched, love gently unclaimed. This gentle realization filled her heart with quiet sadness, regret blooming softly yet unmistakably, its presence undeniable. Returning quietly to her apartment, Emma stood silently before the mirror, her reflection softened gently by evening shadows. She studied quietly the woman before her, noticing clearly the gentle lines etched by years of quiet longing, the subtle sadness lurking softly behind her eyes. Tears gathered gently, yet she blinked them back, understanding now deeply the quiet, painful truth. She had been her own greatest barrier to happiness, the careful guardian of her heart, who had silently imprisoned it behind walls of quiet caution and fear. Emma spent the night awake, sitting quietly by the window as darkness slowly gave way to gentle dawn. The city woke softly around her, sounds of distant bells gently marking the passing hours, the quiet rhythm comforting yet poignant. As morning sunlight finally broke softly through clouds, Emma made a quiet decision, determined now to confront gently yet firmly the fears and hesitations that had quietly defined too much of her life. Gathering quiet resolve, she dressed carefully, her heart beating softly yet steadily with determination. She knew clearly what she must say to David, understanding fully the risks, yet quietly committed to breaking finally free from the gentle silence that had cost her so much. With quiet urgency, she stepped from her apartment, walking deliberately through the awakening city streets toward David's small flat near the river. Arriving quietly at his door, she hesitated briefly, heart pounding softly with quiet anticipation and fear. She raised her hand gently to knock, yet paused, noticing carefully the subtle, heartbreaking quiet within. No movement, no gentle sounds of life. Slowly, dread settling softly into her chest, Emma noticed the envelope taped carefully to the door, her name gently written across its surface in familiar handwriting. Her hands trembled softly as she opened it, heart sinking quietly as she read David's careful words. He had chosen quietly to leave Florence, his note filled gently with regret and quiet apology, acknowledging softly his inability to fully move past Laura's memory, despite his genuine feelings for Emma. The final lines echoed gently yet devastatingly within her. Emma, perhaps our greatest mistake was silence, the words never spoken clearly, the truths left gently unsaid. I leave now, quietly heartbroken, understanding fully that hesitation cost us something quietly precious. Forgive me, and please forgive yourself too, for choosing silence. I will carry you quietly within me always. Emma stood silently, the letter trembling softly in her hand, the quiet tragedy of their story finally clear. Her heart ached gently yet profoundly, understanding clearly the irreversible quiet pain of missed opportunity. Around her, the world continued softly, unaware of the quiet devastation within her chest. As gentle rain began softly falling, Emma turned quietly, walking slowly back toward her apartment, heart heavy with quiet sorrow, yet finally, deeply understanding the profound, gentle cost of silence. In the quiet months following David's departure, Florence gradually returned to its gentle, familiar rhythm, yet for Emma, nothing felt quite the same. Each day stretched softly into the next, marked gently by routines she had once cherished, but now found quietly hollow. She moved quietly through her days, attending carefully to small, familiar tasks. Yet each action echoed gently with reminders of love quietly lost, opportunities softly missed, words gently left unspoken. One quiet afternoon, as autumn began, painting Florence in gentle shades of amber and gold, Emma received an unexpected letter, a plain envelope bearing no return address, her name carefully handwritten across its surface. Her heart quickened gently as she recognized instantly the familiar handwriting. Not David's, but someone equally significant. Isabella, the older woman she'd met months earlier in the gallery, whose quiet wisdom had guided Emma gently through moments of deep uncertainty. Emma opened the letter carefully, heart filled softly with curiosity and quiet anticipation, wondering gently why Isabella had reached out after so much time. The letter began warmly, Isabella's gentle tone evident in every carefully chosen word, her writing filled softly with compassion, wisdom, and quiet sincerity. Dearest Emma, forgive me for intruding gently upon your solitude, but I recently learned of David's departure, and knowing your gentle heart, I felt compelled quietly to write you. You deserve to know a truth David himself quietly carried, yet never shared openly, believing perhaps it would burden you further. After all you have endured, I believe this gentle truth may finally grant you peace, even amidst quiet sadness. The photograph you found in the book, the woman smiling softly, whose inscription David guarded so quietly, was indeed Laura, his beloved wife, lost tragically years ago. What David quietly withheld, not out of malice but quiet fear, was the manner of her passing, and how deeply connected it remains, quietly, to you. Laura was traveling alone in Vermont many years ago, a journey intended quietly for reflection and healing as their marriage had begun gently fracturing under quiet strain. It was there, on a narrow country road, that her life was tragically and quietly ended in a sudden accident. For David, Vermont quietly symbolized loss, pain, and regret, a place forever shadowed gently by grief. Meeting you, someone from that very place, felt profoundly significant, yet quietly terrifying, a gentle sign from fate he could neither fully embrace nor easily dismiss. Emma paused quietly, her pulse quickening softly, heart aching gently with unexpected revelation. Vermont, the quiet sanctuary she'd loved, the place she'd retreated to heal, had unknowingly carried a quiet weight of sorrow for David, the man she'd come quietly to love. The gentle irony struck her profoundly, tears softly filling her eyes as she continued reading Isabella's gentle words. David never blamed anyone, least of all you, but his quiet hesitation arose from deep, unspoken grief, a quiet inability to fully separate you from memories of loss. When he learned your story, discovered your gentle solitude rooted in Vermont, he felt quietly overwhelmed by fate's bittersweet, complex connection. He withdrew quietly, not because he felt less, but precisely because he felt deeply, quietly, overwhelmingly afraid of causing further quiet suffering, for you, himself, even Laura's memory. I share this truth gently, Emma, hoping it might allow quiet understanding to soften your grief. Love, especially complicated by loss and quiet, regret, rarely unfolds gently or simply, but perhaps knowing clearly David's quiet truth might grant you quiet solace, that his departure arose from profound compassion and quiet respect for both your gentle hearts, not from a lack of affection. Whatever comes next, Emma, know this. Deeply. You gave David something quietly precious, a reason, however fleeting, to believe gently in love's quiet possibility again. For that alone, You deserve profound gratitude, quiet acknowledgement of the gentle courage required to open your heart despite uncertainty. Please, dear friend, allow yourself gentle forgiveness, compassion, and healing. For love, even when imperfect, is always quietly courageous, always profoundly meaningful. With deepest affection, Isabella. Emma lowered the letter gently, heart, filled quietly with an overwhelming tide of mixed emotions: gratitude, sorrow, relief, quiet awe at love's gentle complexity. She understood now clearly the quiet, poignant truth behind David's gentle hesitation, his quiet withdrawal rooted, deeply not in rejection but profound compassion. Tears gently streamed down her cheeks, each one quietly cleansing lingering wounds of misunderstanding and quiet regret. In the days following Isabella's gentle revelation, Emma moved quietly through Florence with newfound clarity, heart quietly lighter despite lingering sadness. Understanding David's quiet truth allowed gentle acceptance to gradually bloom within her, softening quiet regrets into quiet forgiveness. For David, for herself, even for fate's gentle yet poignant cruelty. Weeks later, on a gentle, rainy evening, Emma visited Isabella, warmly welcomed into the older woman's quiet, art-filled home. Together, they shared gentle conversation, cups of tea warming hands softly, their friendship quietly deepening through shared vulnerability and quiet understanding. Isabella spoke gently of love's quiet complexity, how often fate entwines lives quietly yet profoundly, leaving gentle, subtle traces on hearts that might never fully heal, yet always quietly deepen their capacity for compassion and hope. As Emma prepared to leave, Isabella placed gently into her hands a carefully wrapped package. "David asked me quietly to keep this safe," Isabella explained softly, eyes filled gently with quiet compassion. "I believe it belongs quietly with you now." Returning quietly to her apartment, Emma opened the package carefully, heart quickening, gently as she recognized instantly the familiar book. The very one David had left at La Note Café months earlier, its cover gently worn, pages softly marked by time. Opening it gently, she found nestled carefully inside another photograph. One she hadn't seen before. It was Laura, captured gently in candid laughter, eyes sparkling softly with quiet joy, her gaze directed affectionately toward someone just beyond the camera's reach. Emma turned the photograph gently, discovering carefully written words in David's familiar handwriting. Laura, captured gently in laughter, the quiet reminder that love, though sometimes brief, leaves behind joy profound enough to heal even deepest grief. Emma held the photograph gently, heart quietly overwhelmed, understanding deeply now the profound significance of David's quiet gesture, his quiet acknowledgement of the profound yet subtle connection binding them all gently through fate, loss and quiet, resilient hope. That night, as rain gently tapped against her window, Emma placed the photograph carefully upon her bedside table beside the worn book, gentle symbols of love's quiet complexity, its poignant, gentle contradictions. She lay quietly awake, heart softly reflecting upon Isabella's gentle wisdom, David's profound vulnerability, her own quiet journey toward healing and quiet courage. She understood now clearly the gentle truth underlying all their stories. Love's quiet power arose not from perfect resolutions or simple happiness, but rather from quiet bravery, profound vulnerability, and gentle willingness to embrace complexity despite uncertainty. In the quiet darkness, Emma whispered softly, words she'd long withheld, releasing finally the quiet burdens of regret, misunderstanding, and hesitation. "I forgive you, David," she whispered gently, heart profoundly lighter, tears gently falling, not from sorrow, but quiet release. "And perhaps most importantly, I forgive myself." Sleep came softly, gently enveloping Emma in quiet peace, the profound, gentle acknowledgement that love's quiet strength lay not in perfect endings, but in quiet bravery, gentle forgiveness, and profound, quiet willingness to love courageously, despite everything. Have you ever discovered a quiet truth that changed your understanding completely? I'd love to hear your story. In the gentle months following Isabella's letter, Florence quietly embraced Emma as though she had always belonged there, the city softly enfolding her in its timeless rhythms. Each day she walked through familiar streets, finding quiet solace in routines that no longer felt hollow but resonated gently with newfound meaning. David's memory lingered softly within her, now a gentle, bittersweet presence she carried tenderly, understanding clearly the profound beauty within their unfinished story. Emma continued to frequent La Note Café, now less with expectation and more with quiet gratitude. Luca's warmth remained a steady, gentle anchor in her daily routine, his youthful optimism reminding her softly of life's quiet capacity for renewal. Their conversations became deeper, Luca carefully sharing his own hopes and uncertainties, the gentle bond between them strengthening quietly through shared vulnerability. As months passed softly into the gentle embrace of spring, Emma felt quiet. Healing blossomed gently within her heart. She began writing again, filling pages quietly with reflections on love's quiet complexity, grief's gentle lessons, and the soft courage required to embrace uncertainty. Writing became a gentle act of renewal, each carefully chosen word helping her quietly release lingering regrets, gently shaping her quiet acceptance of the past. One quiet afternoon, Emma wandered into a familiar gallery, the one where she'd first met Isabella. As she stepped quietly inside, she noticed immediately a familiar figure standing gently before a painting. Isabella herself, her gentle presence unmistakably serene, thoughtful. Emma approached quietly, warmly greeting the older woman who had gently guided her through life's subtle complexities. They embraced softly, friendship quietly reaffirmed through mutual understanding and quiet affection. Isabella smiled gently, eyes twinkling softly with quiet wisdom as she spoke. "Emma, you look quietly at peace. Have you found what you sought?" Emma considered gently before responding softly yet confidently. "I've learned to find peace in uncertainty, Isabella." "Perhaps that's exactly what I needed all along." Isabella nodded gently, understanding clearly the quiet strength behind Emma's words. They spoke softly of David, each gently acknowledging how profoundly he had touched their lives. Isabella revealed quietly that David had settled again in a small coastal town, finding gentle solace in solitude, yet continuing quietly to cherish his brief connection with Emma. Emma listened softly, her heart quietly stirred, yet gently comforted by the knowledge of David's peace. They spoke gently of life's quiet complexities, how love, though sometimes incomplete, left quietly profound marks, guiding gently their hearts toward deeper compassion, resilience, and understanding. Emma felt quietly grateful for Isabella's gentle wisdom, her quiet presence a steady beacon guiding gently through life's subtle darkness. Days continued gently onward, each one quietly deepening Emma's gentle connection to Florence, her quiet acceptance of the past gradually blossoming into genuine subtle happiness. She often visited places shared quietly with David, parks, galleries, quiet bridges beneath softly illuminated lamps, each gentle moment filled now not with longing but quiet gratitude for the brief, powerful love they had shared. One quiet evening, rain gently tapping against cobblestones. Emma sat alone at La Note Café, notebook resting gently beside her espresso. Outside, Florence's lights shimmered softly through gentle rainfall. The city quietly beautiful beneath evening's gentle embrace. She wrote quietly, heart gently reflecting upon everything she had learned. Love's quiet complexity, loss's gentle lessons, courage's subtle yet powerful role in healing. As she finished writing, Luca approached quietly, setting another espresso gently on her table. He hesitated softly before speaking carefully, eyes gentle yet uncertain. "Emma, I've something to give you. It arrived today, from David." Emma's heart quickened gently, yet now quietly calm, prepared softly for whatever the package contained. Luca handed her a small envelope, his eyes gently reassuring, quietly respectful of her privacy. Emma carefully opened it, finding inside a single sheet of paper, David's familiar handwriting filling her heart softly with quiet warmth. "Emma, I hope this finds you quietly happy, embracing gently the peace you deserve. I've settled quietly, by the sea, finding gentle solace here, yet you remain softly, profoundly within my thoughts. I write quietly today to say something clearly. I'm grateful beyond words for your gentle courage, your quiet kindness, and the profound way you helped my heart breathe again. Though our paths quietly diverged, please know my gratitude remains profound, eternal. May your life be gently filled with quiet joy, profound courage, and love's quiet strength, wherever you may find it. With gentle affection, always, David." Emma lowered the letter gently, heart quietly full, gratitude filling softly every quiet corner of her being. Tears gathered gently, yet she blinked them quietly away, now recognizing clearly the profound, quiet gift David's words provided. Quiet closure, gentle understanding, profound gratitude. Later, as she stepped quietly from La Notte Cafe into gentle evening rain, Emma felt quietly renewed, heart gently released from lingering sadness, quietly embracing now the beautiful complexity of their incomplete story. Walking slowly through Florence's softly glowing streets, she reflected gently upon everything she had learned. The quiet courage required to love deeply despite loss, the gentle bravery necessary to embrace uncertainty, and profound strength within quiet forgiveness. That night, alone in her softly lit apartment, Emma carefully placed David's letter gently beside Laura's photograph and the worn book. Symbols quietly powerful, reminders softly profound of love's gentle complexity. She whispered quietly words of gratitude toward David, Laura, Isabella, Julia, each quietly shaping her journey toward gentle healing, subtle acceptance, and quiet courage. Time continued softly onward, seasons gently changing Florence's quiet beauty. Yet Emma remained steady, heart quietly resilient, filled softly with profound gratitude. She continued quietly writing, gradually publishing reflections on love, loss, quiet courage, and healing, each gentle essay resonating deeply with readers, their quiet stories echoing softly her own. Over gentle months, readers began quietly, sharing their stories in response, each filled gently with quiet vulnerability, profound honesty, subtle bravery. Emma found gentle purpose in quietly connecting these shared experiences, her own quiet journey becoming gently meaningful through guiding softly others toward quiet healing. One quiet afternoon, seated softly at La Notte Cafe, notebook gently, filled with reader stories, Emma smiled quietly, heart profoundly content despite life's subtle imperfections. Outside, rain fell softly, the city quietly peaceful beneath its gentle touch. She understood clearly now that happiness arose gently, not from perfect endings, but quietly from accepting uncertainty, embracing love's subtle imperfections, allowing quiet gratitude to illuminate gently life's darker moments. As evening approached softly, Emma stood quietly, gathering belongings carefully, heart gently resolved. Luca approached quietly, smiling softly, asking gently if she was well. Emma nodded gently, responding softly yet confidently. "More at peace than ever, Luca. Thank you for being quietly present throughout this gentle journey. He smiled warmly, understanding clearly the profound truth behind her quiet words. Emma stepped softly into gentle twilight, heart quietly grateful for life's gentle complexity, now fully understanding love's quiet, resilient strength. She paused gently beneath a softly glowing street lamp, smiling quietly upward into gentle rain, heart quietly full, soul gently at peace. She whispered softly words quietly profound, heart gently free at last. Thank you for everything. Around her, gentle rain continued softly, Florence quietly beautiful beneath evening's gentle embrace. She smiled gently, understanding now clearly that love's quiet power arose softly not from perfect conclusions, but from gentle courage, quiet vulnerability, and the profound willingness to embrace uncertainty. Perhaps her story quietly continued, gently imperfect, subtly unresolved, yet profoundly meaningful. Perhaps love's gentle beauty lay precisely within its quiet incompleteness, within the subtle bravery required to cherish gently what might never fully be. Emma walked gently onward, heart quietly open, life gently beautiful, despite, or perhaps, precisely because of, its quiet imperfection, and as gentle rain continued softly falling, Emma smiled gently, heart quietly content, profoundly grateful, for love, quiet courage, and life's gentle, breathtaking complexity. Have you ever learned gently to embrace love's quiet complexity? Subscribe to follow more stories about second chances, quiet courage, and love's profound beauty amid life's gentle imperfections. I'd love to share more quiet journeys with you. Hey, I'm Mary, bringing you awesome content every daily. Smash that follow and subscribe if you're vibing with me. Let's grow this journey together.